It's hard to know. Okay, good. Welcome. I'm Mark Robbins. I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture, for those of you who are visiting. And it's really fantastic to see you all here, and it's especially great. Staff, administrators, and friends of the school. It's a long time coming, and it's actually wonderful to be here. Change has been really a mantra of the school, and I was going to say just this year with the political climate, but it really has been for the School of Architecture. We've moved at least 3 times in 4 years, and many of you were involved in those moves. When I first came to the school, which is now nearly 5 years ago, the project for the renovation of Slocum Hall had already been percolating for 6 years. It's taken great will by 2 deans and an interim dean, faculty, staff, and 2 university administrations to make this happen. Several faculty committees, and millions of dollars later, we sit, and some of you stand, in this wonderful new auditorium, which is really the heart of our new home. Slocum Hall was designed by 2 professors at the School of Architecture, Frederick Revels and Earl Hallenbach, and funded by Mrs. Russell Sage, who is a philanthropist. Those of you who are from the Troy area will recognize that name. And it was a memorial to her father. Construction began on the building in 1916 and opened after the war ended in 1919. And when it opened, it was the architecture department of the College of Fine Arts. And we were founded in 1873, and we shared the building then with the Joseph Slocum School of Agriculture, as well as the School of Home Economics and the School of Business. During the ensuing 89 years since this building first opened, the Beaux-Arts structure underwent a series of changes in the mix of tenants and in its form, most notably losing its monumental staircase and the original auditorium and the closing of the central atrium space. The original logic of the building had been obscured through generations of partitions and hung ceilings. A striking renovation began in 1976. It was completed by Werner Seligman, then the dean of the school, which asserted a modernist clarity within the building, providing spaces that included a reading room, an exhibition gallery, and offices for the School of Architecture. In 1999, a committee led by Dean Bruce Abbey selected James Garrison and his firm, Garrison Architects, to redesign Slocum Hall as a completely reconsidered home for the School of Architecture. In the years that followed, the project was advanced by interim dean Arthur MacDonald and brought to fruition in the summer of 2008. The renovation design went through many iterations, yet in its final form, the intention of the architects remained clear: to enhance and restore the building's original qualities while updating it technologically, functionally, and aesthetically, reopening the central atrium space and removing sections of the bearing walls allow for pathways of natural light and ventilation, increasing the building's energy efficiency and its transparency. This auditorium and the gallery below have been inserted within the envelope of the original building, with expanded space for studios, research, and offices, review spaces, gallery, reading room, faculty offices, and a cafe surround the atrium, providing a setting that encourages interaction between students, faculty, staff, and visitors. And it establishes a set of compelling interventions within the classical revival building that reflect today the complex nature of architecture and its study. This rededication of Slocum Hall is an optimistic moment for the School of Architecture, marking its new home and underscoring its evolution and its critical presence in campus life. The renovation by Garrison Architects provides the school with a space solely dedicated to the needs of an architectural education, and this for the first time in our school's 135-year history. Within this environment, we have the ideal place to explore our discipline in relation to the widest arc of humanistic and technological endeavor. This is really a time for us all to reflect on our history and our future. And again, I want to thank Jim Garrison for his work and patience and stamina. It was 3 deans after all. And we thank him for returning us in such great form to our school building and also for our ability to occupy it solely. Thanks also go to former Dean Bruce Abbey, who's now in Florence, for having gotten this going, and also to Professor Art McDonald, one of my former professors who worked remarkably hard to reconceptualize this building and to make sure that it responded in the best possible way to the school that we were trying to build. So I thank you. And I also thank and remember Werner Seligman and all of the deans and the faculty and the students who have preceded us. I'd like to recognize Kermit Lee, who's joined us tonight, and I welcome him here. We are all a sum of this past, and we all continue to build upon it. So thank you all for your work, and it is remarkable for us to be here. So this is going to unfortunately be a bit like the Academy Awards, because a building like a film takes a lot of people and a huge amount of effort. And so it's a fiction of the fountainhead that one person alone makes this, as compelling as that notion is of the heroic architect, though, Jim, in fact, you were heroic. But I would like to thank our Chancellor, Nancy Cantor, and our Provost, Eric Spina, for understanding the role of the school within campus life and always supporting it. I'd like to recognize past Provost Deborah Freund, who's with us tonight. For all of her work, working with Ginny Denton, who with Eric Beatty have made sure that this campus has continued to progress. So thank you very much, Ginny, for being here. I'd like to recognize also Sal Tranchina from Jim Garrison's office. And within our own, and I still want to say Office in Design and Construction, because I know it has a new nomenclature, but Brenda Law, Carmen Lupino, and Elaine Matovich, thank you so much for putting up with lots of punch list items and swatches and matching mahogany veneers to wood laminate. So thank you for your patience through all of that process, and you'll see their furnishings throughout this building as you go through. Thanks also to Hayner Hoyt Construction, as well as to our own school advisory board for their work. In our own school, many staff and faculty worked very hard for a number of years to make this happen, and of course, we all thank them for that. Ann Munley provided exceptional continuity and intelligence and support, especially in the past 2 years, in the midst of a very, very difficult time in her own personal research and in her development of her private work. It's really been kind of remarkable to work with you, and thank you for that. And thank you for working with Randall throughout these years to make sure that we moved in and we had a place to move into. So. And I'd like to thank Katrin Hansen, who has always been there for the school and is remarkably good. Tunde, who gets to be called by a single name like a rock star. And Michelle Klock, who's very new but has immediately become a part of our family here at the school and has worked during this move to make sure that we all had a place to go to. And a special thanks, really, to our IT guys, Chuck Savage and Andy Malloy, for reinstalling us and installing us and going through nearly biblical trials, including flood, in making this happen. So thank you very much. After tonight's lecture, I'd like to welcome you all to a reception and also to see an exhibition about the building, which is in the space down below. This kind of twinning between the auditorium and the gallery, and the fact that we have an exhibition in space, really is a kind of remarkable coming to fruition of what the center of this building was envisioned to be. And that was really about programming, and programming in the kind of largest possible sense in terms of exhibitions and lectures and kind of the public life and the public presence of architecture on campus. On that exhibition, I'd like to thank the staff members from Jim Garrison's office, Timothy Peterson, Vanessa Moon, and Jeremy Thompson. And in our school, the exhibition committee, especially Marissa Tyrone and Michael Carroll, who I'd like to give a round of applause for all of their work in pulling this together. You'll see that it looks very, very good. And of course, they were ably assisted by Jean-Francois Bedard and students Stephen Klimek, William Murillo, Timothy Gale, Nilis Klingel, and Christina Webb. Even our SU archive staff, and you'll see the presence of that work down below, Mary O'Brien, who is no relation to our Mary Kate O'Brien, and also our own staff, Michelle Klock, Katrin Hansen, and Mary Kate O'Brien, and that is our Mary Kate O'Brien. So with that, I would like to introduce Eric Beatty to say a few words about the building and something about the process. Eric is the director of SU's Office of Campus Planning, Design, and Construction. Previously, Eric was the director of planning and construction at Williams College, and he began his work here at SU just as the School of Architecture was poised to complete the drawings, complete the document set for the School of Architecture. We were trying to figure out how we could actually get the renovation done. And so Eric was part of trying to help deal with the move downtown off campus while this building was getting renovated. And he's really been a remarkable partner for us at the school throughout change orders, changes in scope, changes in schedule, and changes in program. In this past 4 years, we've had a number of opportunities to talk about campus and city planning, architect selection processes, and at least 3 projects that I can count for the School of Architecture. I've come to value his calm expertise and his high regard for the School of Architecture. He's become a good friend. Eric? Thanks very much.
Mark emphasized to me the word few words, so we will keep it brief. I can't wait to hear what Jim has to say about the building, so we'll get on with the show pretty quickly. But what a nice feeling to be standing in this room after all we've been through. And as Mark says, there are lots and lots of people that have to come together. And my office is in an interesting position where we kind of get to see it from all the different angles. There were plenty of times when members of the school were kind of, I'll say, crying on our shoulder for some, guidance and support. There were times when Jim and his team were also kind of leaning on us a little for some support and guidance. There were times when the contractor was leaning on us for a little support and guidance. And I'd like to again acknowledge my staff for the wonderful efforts that it goes pretty deep in our office on this project. We had all hands on deck, I think, several times. And there's something about this building that really grows on you. It's, you know, I've fallen in love with it, and it's somehow the work that we've done here is minor in the grand scheme of this building, and yet it's beautiful. So in a way, it feels like it's kind of a back to the future. You know, I think we've taken original aspects of the building and parts of it and returned it to the way it needs to be. So it's quite a nice feeling, and I want to congratulate Jim on a great job. Love to hear from you now.
Thanks so much, Eric. It's really critical to have somebody pulling for you, who's helping to build the project. And even in the best projects, as any of you know who have built anything, the best projects require an amazing amount of coordination and also trust that things aren't going wrong necessarily because someone wants them to go wrong, but because they just do. And that's just part of what we do as architects. And it always seemed to me in thinking about this project that it takes a very specific brand of fortitude, not only to have an architect as a client, but to make a school for architects. And in this case, to have the work be the home and the public face of your alma mater. It's a delight to welcome Jim Garrison, who took on this challenge almost 9 years ago. Jim graduated from SU, from the School of Architecture in 1976, and received the Matthew Del Gaudio Award here for Design Excellence. And at Syracuse, he apprenticed with modernists like Lou Scholar and Kermit Lee, and was also mentored by Werner Seligman. Jim worked at Polshek Partners and Architects, where we had first met, and he started there in 1978, and he handled the concept, design, and technical developments of projects including the master plan for the Brooklyn Museum, and he worked on the National Inventors Hall of Fame in Akron, Ohio, and receiving 4 Progressive Architecture Design Awards and 2 Honor Awards from the AIA. In 1991, Jim founded the current firm of Garrison Architects. The firm's award-winning work covers a range of building types, including government projects such as the U.S. Border Patrol Station in Murrieta, California, which won a 2006 AIS New York State Design Merit Award and a 2006 GSA Design Award. He's also worked on embassies in Korea, Rabat, Oman, and Morocco. Other projects include a master plan for the city of Tokyo, the offices of Swissair in Rockefeller Center, and the redesign of Restoration Plaza in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Jim Garrison has a reputation as one of the pioneering firms in sustainable modern design. His work employs a range of strategies, from the elimination of air conditioning to the conservation of water and natural resources. Recent modular projects integrate these ideas by making long-lasting buildings that can be built quickly, reducing design and construction costs, and thereby conserving energy. His work has been published in Architectural Record, Contract, and numerous other publications, and he is a recipient of awards from the Chicago Athenaeum, as well as the GSA and the AIA. It's with great pleasure that I welcome Jim Garrison to speak to us all.
Check two, 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 two. Check two, check two, check two. Check two.
The mute was on.
Does it work?
All right. Thank you.
Say something, please.
Is that better? Can you hear that? Great. All right. So Kevin, the engineering, yes, the engineering. Kevin is an interesting fellow. He took it upon himself to put sensors around the interior and exterior of Slocum on various facades and watch them over the course of the summer, winter, spring, and fall. And we discovered in the course of this, this little test that Slocum had a sort of, it had an ability to withstand and temper the elements that we never suspected. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we get down the road a little bit. You know, some people affect the outcome or the course of a project by their even-handed goodwill and common sense, and that is Eric Beatty, who made a tremendous difference in trying to complete this. I don't think it would have been possible without it. And the guy who got the drawings done and continues to walk through here, taking care of every detail, is Sal Tranchina. And I tell you, the heroes of architecture offices are not guys like me. They're not the people who draw necessarily. I can tell you this. They are the project architects. Those are the people who are in the trenches, do the heavy lifting, and every office in this earth that succeeds on the backs of its project architects. And Sal is as good as they come. The faculty team, it included many people over the years. It was both a triumph and a trial, to tell you the truth. I mean, having 34 architects as your client is probably the most daunting task imaginable. But at our best, and I say our as a team, I think there were remarkable things that were understood, and everyone got on the bandwagon. Mark Robbins had a great deal to do with the final shape of this auditorium and its nature. Art McDonald was into the details of this whole business all the way through. And the one fellow who's no longer with us, who I don't know many of you know, it was an architecture professor named Joel Bostic. And Joel Bostic was the quintessential hands-on practitioner. And he was a great craftsman. And he took on everything about this building. And he's, I think more than anyone else, he's responsible for us sort of extracting ourselves out of a kind of mindset of modernist imposition and starting to work with the fabric of this building as it was given. And he was a modern architect. So it's a very funny thing. Ann Munley was fantastic. I mean, Ann also kept us together. And I have to say something about Mark. You know, Mark came to this project when it really, I think we kind of duped him into the deanship. You know, he walked in. We said, "Oh, by the way, we have this big project, and you know, you're going to have to find money. You're going to have to." But he did it, and kudos, big kudos. And then, you know, there are hundreds of people working in this building, and Gus Hernandez and Tim Kelly were spectacular. They were very, very good. This renovation was completed for $114 a square foot. I have to tell you that a new building today, in most places, costs over $400 or even $500 a square foot. If it's Renzo Piano, it's $2,500 a square foot. But the fact is, this is an amazing accomplishment. And it only happened because the entire team constantly worked it and worked together. And you can imagine with those kinds of limits how difficult it is. We were screaming on Eric's shoulder because we wanted architecture. But Eric had many masters to fill, including that budget. So it was really a fantastic effort on everyone's part. You know, Werner made some changes to this building. But before Werner made changes to this building, there was an architect who wanted to raise its roof and add another floor to its top. And I remember when I first came to Kermit Lee's office, he had a giant model of Slocum with another floor on top of the building and new fire stairs coming through. So I never forgot the fire stairs. And we actually have fire stairs. In case of a fire, you know, they're in the back corners. So I thought we'd try to talk a little bit tonight about why Slocum ended up in the condition we found it in. How many of you were in Slocum before it was renovated? Well, quite a few, so you remember. Why? How is it that a building like this, with certain features and proportions, ends up really being, in a way, forgotten? And I think that's really a question I want to grapple with tonight, because I think it's the context that we all swim in. Slocum Hall has been a witness to the 20th century, right? The 20th century evolved over the course of this building's existence. And the 20th century was an amazing time. And I think the attitudes that we absorbed as a culture and we continue to deal with as architects played themselves out over the course of this building's history. And that's what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about tonight. This is a pre-renovation studio. So I hope the next time I come, they don't look like this again, but I fear that they might.
Say that again.
Keep it clean, please. Keep it clean. This is in Krause Hall. This is the class of perhaps 1895. I'm not sure exactly. It doesn't look much like you all, does it? But they're fine, upstanding white men, all in ties. And this guy has attitude, right? And I know that attitude perseveres. Any photograph of Slocum when it was completed, and you get some idea of when. Slocum Hall was never a beautiful building. With all due respect to its original architects, I would call it the Pee Wee Herman of classical buildings because it has its pants hiked up too high. And it's a bit of a factory, you know? I mean, this is the point where classicism was used for everything. So it has all kinds of repetitive windows. It's not quite a palace, but it's generous. And it had some wonderful features that really deserve its respect. And I would also say that it was beautifully crafted for its time. The atrium as it was originally conceived. So you can see that there is a kind of confusion at work here, a kind of, there's a little frame. You see that this is 1917. The steel frame is starting to be understood. There are bearing walls at the same time. Both of these pieces are sort of pushed together in a kind of combination of some confusion. The fourth floor at the time it was used as School of Architecture, you see it doesn't look too different from the fourth floor as it is today. We really removed a lot of things just to find this space again. One of the things to understand about Slocum is it was a building on a street as opposed to a building around a quadrangle, or that was part of a larger system. These are the buildings that I'm not sure about the chronology of each construction, but that more or less existed at the time of Slocum's arrival. And you can see it basically turns the corner. The University coal pit was immediately behind Slocum when it was constructed. And these buildings, all of them, really don't anticipate that you move through the building to another space. They really end at the space we're in now. So there's the reason for their particular organization, which always struck me as somewhat odd. And I always wondered, and of course one of the great affronts to Slocum is the ignominious way in which Link is smashed into the back of the building, right? But now we have a way, if you wind your way through the stairs, of going and visiting the engineers, which I suggest you do because they do great things. They have race cars downstairs. Have you seen their cars? They have great things. So this is a plan of Slocum as it was constructed. So here it is. It's a bearing wall building, combination of terracotta and brick, granite, some limestone, some plaster. It has steel columns, and it has steel beams, and it has, in certain places, you can see just gently, steel columns. So it's a hybrid building. It has a combination of a lot of things going on in it. And as a bearing wall building, it's made up of cells, big rooms which are, pretty opaque. I mean, they have windows on the exterior, but you can't really see to the interior. And, of course, this idea that you come up the stairs and the campus experience ends at the lecture hall. But the section, just as now, the section is where it all happens in this building, where all the potential exists. You see, as you came up the stairs, crossed through the atrium, there were two giant lecture rooms, here and here. Now, you know that this one has been filled in with the floor of the fourth floor studios. And the reason those columns exist behind you is because they're taking the additional force of the fourth floor studios down to the ground. So when we came to this building, this atrium floor was filled in. Of course, we had a mess of things, several generations of construction in here. And of course, we have this going across the front. And we know we don't have a stair anymore. Now, what was happening around the time of this building? This building represents really the end of the classical trajectory in architecture. And there are many buildings which are the buildings of McKim, Mead, and White. I'll show you a couple of them. This is Penn Station. Penn Station has certain similarities in the sense that it has a bearing wall exterior and it has a cast iron and steel interior. So again, it's this kind of hybrid structure because the image of cut stone and rustication really needed to be preserved as a kind of cultural idea. But what else was happening? The building was occupied by 1919, started in 1917. I have a list of things that were going on in 1917. What's one big thing that happened in October of 1917? Russian Revolution, right? The first African-American jazz recording. The first coining of the word constructivism. The United States entry into World War I. In 1904, not too far away, Wright's Larkin building, which he was reviled for by the arts and crafts movement for having stripped all of the ornament away from this building. This amazing apparition of 1919, just as this building's being finished, Mies van der Rohe imagines a building of pure skin and pure frame. And it's one of the most remarkable artistic achievements, I think, of the 20th century. And by 1920, we have Mr. Tatlin and constructivism in full bloom. So here we are in this building. Imagine you're an architect. Now, I imagine there were many classicists at the time who taught at the School of Architecture at Syracuse. I understand they were doing ink washes into the 60s in some cases. But there were probably a few dedicated avant-garde architects as well. And they certainly would not have been happy to be here as the 20th century starts to really generate its nature. So what is its nature? Well, these are wonderful propaganda pieces. I'm going to use a little Soviet-era propaganda to talk about this for a minute. This is, these are actually two separate images. This is the replacement of the factory for the church. And you see that the vocabulary of factory components, machine-like forms, now becomes the dress of the people that basically occupy the new church, the new place of worship, which is the place of production. So the world of classicism is being disassembled, and we are reconstructing the modern world, and the church is being infected by machinery. The interesting thing about this part of the 20th century is that these ideologies, which were meant to be the great saving graces of the human race, proved to be rather brittle, exclusive, and inhumane. This is a post-Stalin pit of propaganda. It said, "This will never happen again." There's a picture of Stalin as a jail, as a gulag, with cells, made of cells. It was just before Khrushchev came into power. And of course, Hitler builds. This idea, in the beginning of the century, that there were these ideas that were so important that everything could be destroyed for them, was something that, in my mind, infected modern architecture in a way that made it possible for modernism to basically do away with the potential of the past and be really blind to it. And that's, in the kind of big sense, I think, is why we ended up with a building that we really couldn't come to respect. And this is sort of the evidence, you know, the sort of miniature Villa Redoux of Queensbridge City in New York, leveling hundreds of blocks and basically wiping out all context in its wake. So this idea of ideological context, this idea of architectural context, and the kind of clean slate that was clearly on everyone's mind. And we have events like this, which are the Brooklyn Museum, again by McKinley and White, about the same era. Slocum, a little earlier, it had a stairway, a grand stair. It made the building, it anchored it to the earth, it made it its front face. In 1925, it was removed by the modernist Lescaz. He said it was decrepit. I say that these limestone buildings of solid blocks of limestone were most certainly not going to fall down in 20 years. But what Lescaz was really doing was allowing the building to be entered at grade so that the population did not have to ascend to the exclusive halls of culture. This idea of egalitarian access has had overwhelmed culture to the point where we should modify buildings in a very aggressive way. And of course, the fate of Penn Station. And what replaced Penn Station was Madison Square Garden, which is 9-foot ceilings and a bit of a gulag itself. Guess what happened to Slocum? Right, and the architects. Ginny tells me the architects removed these stairs. That all these things were afoot at the time, and I don't know the particular history, but I know they're missing, and I'm sure they're missing for similar reasons. And I think we should think about returning them, even though this is from Eisenstein's Battleship Potemkin. And there's this idea of the stairs, the grand stairs being used as a stage set, right, for the Tsar's soldiers' hostages could mow down the poor peasants on the steps because they could not ascend to the throne above. But I think that for the modernists of the mid-century, the hung ceiling, transparency, all this promise could not be found in Slocum Hall. So why not fill in the atrium? We can use the space. Why not lower the ceilings? We can save some energy. Let's talk about additions for a minute, about this idea of how you coexist with what comes before you. I would say that this attitude of sort of uncompromising aggression in some ways persists, and that we as architects sometimes lose sight of where the potential relationship between the new and old lies. There have always been ways to do it, and to do it well. Scarpa illustrates with tremendous skill the kind of insertion of material, careful form making, and spatial respect. We have Calatrava adding to St. John the Divine with a structure derived from the very spirit of medieval tracery. And we have this amazing renovation by Foster of the Reichstag building, where this unfortunate bombed out artifact, which sat fallow for years and years, is finally transformed and made transparent through modernism, through modern architecture. In each one of these cases, we have additions and insertions which respect the essence of the primary object of the building. And that was our departure point for Slocum. It was what we'd hoped to do. And it was really, I think, your schools and your faculty's charge that we should do so. We started with 3 ideas. Porosity, which Mark mentioned, light in the center, and the idea of connecting the ground floor back to the campus. Let's say we got this, we got this. We didn't get this. This is what Slocum looks like in its context, right? The engineering school, this kind of warren of corridors. And you know, we have Lyman over here, we have arts over here. Now, Slocum is at the crossroads between many of these disciplines. It's in a wonderful position to be a kind of center for the kind of interdisciplinary potential and combination of these things. And I hope it will ultimately do that. So we kept working on this idea of it being connected by various means. And I know Ann Munley's working on his studio, Art McDonald's working in his studio on things that would allow that to happen. But this is a wonderful building because it, you know, the first law of real estate, right, is location, location, location. You can see from the plan, this is really what we did. These are the insertions that we made. Everything else we removed. We did very little. We put 2 cores in, you know, this little box downstairs for the student store. Cores march up through the building. The heart of the building, as Mark aptly puts it, is this new object that's placed inside of the old building. Cores continue through, and you see things are just removed. But where the real, again, magic happens in this building is in the section, because we allow light in and we allow air to come through. Now, here's what we didn't know when we started this. By Carrier, you know, who later moved his factory to Syracuse, invented, I think it was 1898, the air conditioning machine so that newsprint would not stretch when it was being produced. It was an industrial method. And by the 1920s, it became something that people used in their homes and businesses. But in 1917, when this building was built, air conditioning was not used. Mechanical ventilation was not used in buildings. So what the architects did was they inherited several thousand years of technique regarding how to temper climate through the use of form, space, and an understanding of physics. So what they did is they made a building that allowed air to come in, cool air to come in at the bottom, to circulate up through the building. It would generate heat through its skylight at the top. Heat is buoyant, or hot air is buoyant. It wants to escape, and air would be drawn through the building. So the old building around you, where you see remnants of it, has transoms in the windows. It has or in the doors. It has operable windows because it's a giant respiration machine. It also turned out that when Kevin Noble put his temperature sensors around Slocum, that the exterior wall, which has voids, air voids within the terracotta, is an exceptionally good insulator. And as the building's heated in the wintertime, the heat actually builds up and rises to the top of those very tall ceilings, and it heats the floor above. In the summertime, the hot air disperses to the top. So here's a building which uses through the height, through the space, its vertical space, through all these devices, many techniques, including its solid walls, many techniques to temper climate. We were interested in making perforations so people would see each other. One of the things I did not, that I was most interested in accomplishing is this idea that you could view one another as a community of architects and collaborators. So there is a social purpose for this atrium as well. Here's the transverse section. Heliostat, the view, the old, what we found, some students, I think, we're getting anticipating construction, what we found, what we imagined in our, through our models and through the computer, in the midst of construction, partly demolished, and then finally completed. The old auditorium, what we imagined we might be able to do in construction, the framework within the walls, and as you see it today. We studied many forms for the auditorium. We studied exoskeletal forms. We had a scheme where the sidewalls were made out of glass that basically expanded into the room beyond. We ended up cladding it as we imagined it in its constructed form. You can see that exoskeletal business is now concealed and covered in bamboo. And this is this notion, again, of transparency, so we could connect the gallery and give a sense of the soul of the building for the passerby who comes through in construction and as it's completed. The third floor. So this is the atrium area of the third floor. As we imagined it, lighting studies, and as it is. The fourth floor, as it was, as we found it, in the process of being constructed, and finally as it exists. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that the lay light on the fourth floor has been removed, and the polycarbonate panels have been lowered so that air can pass above this panel and generate more air movement through the building. Because in the end, this building uses about a third of it is air conditioned, maybe 25%. Millions of dollars were saved in air conditioning equipment, but more importantly, I think this building saves about $200,000 a year in energy costs over a fully air-conditioned building. So it makes a tremendous contribution to this idea of sustainability through energy conservation. And then the studios. I don't know how you lived in this place. I mean, I remember seeing smoldering outlets when we were walking through this place. We had some ideas about opening up the studios to the stairwells, which were part of a passive ventilation system. We had some ideas about desks, and this is how we imagined the studios. There were, on the south side, some louvers, which I think some sun control would still make sense there. And of course, as they are today. And finally, this idea we had that we should put the steps back. And I think we should put the steps back because there should be a demonstration to Syracuse University that there is a school of architecture here and there's something special within it, and they should be invited to come in. So that's my introduction. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So that's it. So it's been a pleasure doing this. I'm so glad you're back here. And if there's any questions I can answer, I'd be glad to do so.